Oh. Oh boy, here's the fight that I wanted. Ay, ay, ay. Shoot. 10 seconds to make something happen. Can we do it? Shoot. Oh. Oh no! Man, they really like all stealthed and then came up together, which is kind of wonky. Da da do 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 do. Dang it, dude. Dang it, dude. How did he roll and then cloak that quickly? Okay, the smart heals gotta go. Oh, I got him! Lol, he fell. No! Oh, whoops. I did the thing again. Oops. Where is my next potion, please? I don't think it's gonna happen, dog. I think you lost this fight. Ooh, got them all. Okay. Sorry I lost track of the chat there. But that was kind of fun. It is Stonethorn, right? Did we already agreed on that? We agreed it's Stonethorn. Why do they name these things in such a convoluted way? Why can't we have Orsinium? Yes, new. Stonethorn. Okay, great. Hey guys, my name is Grib, and today I'm bringing you my Stamina Nightblade build for the new Stonethorn patch. It's awesome. Totally didn't forget the name of it a couple times. And we'll just hop right into what I'm running. First of all, I'm not running a mythic. I'm going to go through what mythics I think are good and how you can run them. But I'm running 2-piece Balorg on the body. Both are medium. 5 Clever Alchemist with 2 heavy pieces on the body. That way I'm running 5 medium and 2 heavy. All infused weapon damage jewelry. And on the front bar, I'm running a sharpened Maul of Briarheart. And then I'm just running like smaller Briarheart pieces to make that a 5-piece on the front bar. And then a 3-piece when I'm on the back bar. And on the back bar, I'm running a perfected Master's Bow in defending. And the reason I run this in defending is because I run Escapist Poisons on the back, so I put a weapon damage enchant on the front bar. That way, my weapon damage procs when I'm going in, when I'm attacking people, and I don't actually have to swap back to my bow bar to keep that damage proc up. It'll just proc as soon as it can while I'm light attacking. And then, so the two best traits for Backbar are defending and powered. You can also run infused if you're running your weapon damage glyph on the back bar, which a lot of people do, but I like running these snare poisons on the back bar, which freeze people. And it's funny because there's no real animation to it, so when people get frozen, you'll just see them bashing like this, and it's hilarious. You actually have to roll dodge to break it, but people don't do that, and then you can catch them off guard. I'm running Briarheart on the front bar. This set got a pretty substantial change where now it procs whenever you deal crit damage on the front bar. It gives you 450 weapon damage for 10 seconds. And there are two things that are great about this. The first thing is that you don't actually have to do damage with your front bar. You just have to be on your front bar when you're doing damage. So if you put a venom arrow into somebody, it's a ticking dot. If you swap then to your front bar, you can actually still proc Briar. By the same note, if you proc Briar on the front bar, you can swap back to your back bar and you still have the buff up and it counts towards your vigor. So it's like the coolest front bar set ever because it's really consistent, really easy to keep up. It has a small downtime, but it's not substantial, and you get to transfer that weapon damage to your back bar. So I'll just show you that. Here's my target dummy. I swap to my front bar. There's Briarheart. It just procced. I can swap back to my back bar, and you can see I still have it on my arms, and it is buffing my Vigor tooltip. So it's a really cool set for that reason, and I like it a lot. The other set I run is Clever Alchemist. And I wasn't so sure I was going to run Clever Alchemist at first because I have two proc sets now, right? So I've got a proc set on the front and a proc set on the back. So when neither of those procs are up, my damage is actually pretty low at 3,600 and even lower on the back bar at 3,400. And that really isn't great, but I found that it is enough. The first thing I did to try and address this problem, and this is still something that I recommend, if you don't like Clever Alchemist, I think New Moon Acolyte is a very legitimate replacement to this set. I actually like having New Moon on both bars because even though there's a cost increase to your Magicka skills on the back bar, which is a bit of a bummer, it's a small cost increase. Magicka skills are not skills that you spam anyways, and it really does substantially buff your Vigor. So that's actually a setup that I use. You can see it right here. New Moon and Briar. And on this setup, I'm using one piece of Triune, and the other two should be infused weapon damage. This one is still robust because I haven't actually gotten to trait change it yet, and they're not gold, but I would run 2 infused and 1 Triune, or you can actually honestly run 3 infused and get really good damage as well. And that way, you have that extra damage up on your Vigor bar at all times. And it is a substantial increase, but you're going to have lower peak damage because you're never going to have a Clever Alch proc up, and you're going to have a cost increase. The cost increase isn't that big of a deal, but it's something. And 401 weapon damage is not nearly as good as Clever's like 650 weapon damage or whatever. 675. This is a lot of weapon damage. And I found that when Clever's down, it's still enough to kill. Like with just Briar up, I can kill most people. And then Clever really helps me to finish off people who are very strong, and it gives me like invincibility level healing for 20 seconds. And that's, not like a 50% uptime, but I'd say it's up 30 to 40% of the time, depending on how much I use potions. But I know a lot of people don't like Clever Alchemist because you have to use potions, and you can totally get away with running New Moon if you want to. Now, if you're going to run a Mythic, my recommendation is to not get rid of Balorg. Balorg is just too good. It's like the monster set to use. If you don't have Balorg, Engine Guardian is a good option. Like, that's not bad at all. It's a lot more defensive. I would recommend using this instead, but Engine Guardian is good if you can't get Balorg for some reason. But Balorg is the best, and it's unquestionable. It's just the best in this patch. So don't drop this for a Mythic. This is way too strong to drop for a Mythic. Instead, you should be dropping the Master Bow. And the way that you do that is you take Clever Alch or some other set that you can put on the back bar, and you've got Briar on the front bar and your other set on the back bar, and then you run a Mythic on your jewelry. So whether that's like Ring of the Wild Hunt, which is very popular, Torc of Tonal Constancy, which is really popular, you can run either of those and just take like Clever Alch and put it on the back bar. So then you have 6 pieces on the back bar, so that when you swap to the front bar, you still have 5. So if I was to just switch this out for a Clever Alchemist bow, you'd notice like I'd take off 1 jewelry, add a 2-piece Clever Alch, and that way I'd still have the 4-piece bonus on the front bar. And that's how you do that. Pretty simple. If you don't like Clever Alch, there is a way around this. I found another set that works really well is Gryphon's Ferocity, which I actually bought a set of just to show you. I haven't used it myself, but I know a lot of people that do use it and really like it. It adds 2 lines of weapon crit, which is just fine if you're using Briar anyways, and a little bit of weapon damage. Then after you deal direct damage, you gain Minor Force and Minor Expedition for 10 seconds. I don't love this set. I don't think Minor Force is the best thing ever, and it also doesn't heal you. So, but if you don't like Clever on your back bar, you can run this, and it works pretty well. So, and both are fun. This one's actually a lot of fun. I feel like this is a more fun set than Clever Alch, but Clever Alch is probably a better set, certainly a higher damage set. And it's nice to get that 2 lines of max health, so you don't have to build it in elsewhere. So, it's good stuff. Let's see. So, again, you could use the Torc or Ring of the Wild Hunt. Why don't I run the Torc or the Ring of the Wild Hunt? Well, it's a good thing that you were wondering that, because I was just about to explain. So okay. So either way, whichever one you run, you're dropping damage for, right? You're dropping your Master Bow, and you're getting one of those 2 sets. You're also losing a little bit of flexibility, like you can't run New Moon on your body if you're doing a setup like this, which might be your preference. So you're probably going to lose some healing on your back bar, or kind of on both bars, honestly. Like you're going to lose uptime on healing by making it a back bar set. But why would you want to run it? Well, for the Torc, the idea is to get endless recovery, right? It's to get so much stamina recovery by keeping your magicka low. And keeping your magicka low is actually not something that I like to do at all. First of all, it poses a few problems. In order for you to make up the damage that you're losing, you actually have to make sure that everything else is damaged, which usually means that your Mundus is going to be damaged. You're going to have a much lower base stamina recovery, and that's because, of course, you're relying on the Torc to give you all your stamina recovery, which means if the Torc isn't up, you are going to burn out, and that's not good at all. Like, you don't want to empty your gas tank. If you have to keep your magicka low, that means that there are going to be situations where you're attacking someone, you're burning out your stamina, and your magicka in the meantime is coming back up. And once it crosses that 50% threshold, you're no longer getting your stamina recovery, which means you got to like cloak again or use another magicka ability and then keep going. But like, look, oh my gosh, it's already at 60. Okay, I got to cloak again, and then I get to do another global cooldown. Shoot, I got to use it more, get it down to 1%. Now I can go back in, and I don't have anything into magicka recovery, by the way, but it just comes back way too quickly, essentially. Like, your magicka is going to come back, and then you're going to have to cast more magicka abilities. And magicka abilities are inherently defensive. There are a few buffs that you can use, like you could use Race Against Time, for example, and that's not a bad option. It's a good way. I think it's the best way of keeping your magicka low, but I don't like having to use a buff like that every couple of seconds in order to keep my basic stat, my stamina recovery high. I don't like it. I don't like the idea of needing to like dip out and run away. Like, if I want to pressure someone, I'm going to pressure them, and I'm not going to let them get away, and I'm going to be relentless and force them into a corner and trip them up and kill them. I don't want to be beating on a tank and go, oh man, I'm like 2 or 3 GCDs away from killing him, but I risk running out of stamina. Like, let me just in case dip out for a second. Okay, now I'll come back, but he's all healed and the fight is reset. That's dumb. I don't want to do that. I don't like doing that, so I don't like the Torc. Ring of the Wild Hunt is actually a ton of fun, and I've been using it during this year's IC event a lot, and it's great. I really love it. The problem with it is that as fun as it is unnecessary. It is not a necessary set, and for that reason, I just can't justify it to myself. Like, there's so few situations where I've thought, wow, that Ring of the Wild Hunt really got me out of a mess, and I barely escaped alive, but thanks to that, I made it out. Like, most of the time, you can make it out with just major expedition, being a wood elf, roll dodging, cloak, shade, you have adequate tools to make it out of nasty situations. You don't really need Ring of the Wild Hunt, as fun as it is, and to lose a ton of damage in order to get speed just doesn't do it for me. And I can see why people enjoy it, and I think it is fun, and that's great. It's not for me, though. It's not for me. So I've decided that I'm not going to use either of those, and instead I'm going to get to use Clever on both bars, which is how I prefer it to be, especially because, like, in theory, it's not very hard to just make sure that you're on your bow bar every time you pop a potion, right? That's not so hard to do. The problem is sometimes you pop a potion and then bar swap or roll dodge or do something, and the potion doesn't go off because either it's laggy and you've timed it too close to your roll dodge, or it just doesn't go through, and then you're on your wrong bar, and then you're like trying to use the weapon damage, so you got to swap back, and there are like 10 guys beating on you, and it just, bleh. I like being able to just spam potion, and even if it's lagging, when it goes through, it'll go through, and I won't just get messed up. You know what I mean? That's no fun for me. So I've been using Clever Alch on both bars, which is how I prefer it, and it means I get to use the Master Bow back bar. So those are 3 different setups, essentially, right? You've got, well, 4 even. You've got this setup that I'm using now with the Master Bow. You can use Clever Alch or New Moon. Both are solid. I think Briarheart is basically non-negotiable. It's really, really good. And Sharpen is definitely the way to go on this in terms of like steadiness and damage, and it's extremely reliable. It's nice because I'm not using like any kind of crazy pen set, so a little bit of extra pen from Sharpened goes a long way because I don't have that much pen. The only other pen I have is basically from roll dodging as a wood elf and from CP, and so it's really not much. But yeah, Clever Alch or New Moon, Balorg, Briar front bar, or if you want to use a mythic, you don't have to use a Master Bow, and you can drop one of these sets, either Clever Alch or Gryphon's Ferocity, to your back bar. And that's the move. Let's talk about Mundus Stones. So several Mundus Stones have gotten a buff. Oh, actually, okay, then I'm going to go into stats. Don't let me forget, all right? The one that got the biggest buff is the Serpent. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the best, right? There are a couple options here. The other option, if you're not going to run the Serpent, is basically either Shadow or Warrior. Which one do I use? Which one is more damage? And that is not as easy a question as it might seem. The Shadow was buffed because now it does healing, so that's fantastic. But when I was testing the Warrior versus the Shadow, I actually found that the Warrior was giving me almost identical results, like extremely close results on crits and non-crits. Actually, that's not even true. On crits, they were very similar. On non-crits, though, the Warrior obviously way outperforms the Shadow, because the Shadow only gives you a bonus to your crit damage and healing if you crit. But the Warrior gives you a bonus to your damage and healing regardless of whether or not you crit. So, should you run the Warrior or the Shadow? I would run the Warrior. I think you should test it for yourself. But I'm actually running the Serpent because that gets me to a really comfortable place, allows me to use all damage on my jewelry, and I really like that. In terms of stats, my general goal is in Cyrodiil. I want to have 30k health, and then everything else I'll pour into stamina. The best way to get health, bar none, is by using Triglyphs. It's the most efficient way to fit health into your build. If you have any points into attributes whatsoever, you should first make sure that you have all Triglyphs on. The math behind this is pretty simple. Imagine you have 2 stamina glyphs, one on your helmet, one on your chest, and you need one more line of health, right? You want 1,000 health. So you could subtract 1,000 stamina from here and add in 1,000 health by getting rid of the stamina glyph and adding a health glyph. Then you'd have 1,000 health and 1,000 stamina, right? Or you could just put on 2 triglyphs. You get a sum 1,000 health, 1,000 stam, and 1,000 magicka. So just mathematically speaking, triglyphs are the way to go, because if you're trying to build in more health, you're getting free magicka out of it, and more max magicka is not a bad thing at all. That's the way to go. So all triglyphs for me, and that goes for basically all of my builds. I don't think there's a single Stamblade build that I've done in the last year or two that hasn't had all triglyphs. I know they're expensive, but I think they really provide a huge value. If you're thinking about goaling out your armor, stop and get triglyphs first. It's more cost efficient to add triglyphs than to gold any of this out. Same with jewelry. Don't gold this out until you have all triglyphs. You should gold out your weapons right away. It's not too expensive to gold out just your weapons, but everything else you can totally, absolutely 100% run as purple. There's this misconception that because a lot of YouTubers and streamers like have gold armor sets that you need gold armor to survive, and that's just not true in this game. It's like a 1% difference, if even. Like, it's a little bit more than that because of traits, but it's negligible. If you are golding out your armor before you're getting triglyphs, you're doing it in the wrong order. Just letting you know. So 30k health in Cyrodiil is the goal, and to do that I'm using Artaeum Takeaway Broth, which has 2 minutes left on it, so let's hurry up with this video, am I right? And I also put 8 points into health in order to reach that threshold, and it's very comfortable. The rest goes into stamina, and I end up with almost 28k stamina, which is more than I could have hoped for, honestly. I'm very happy with that number. I'd go as low as like 25.5, 26k if I had to, but I'm really happy to be at 27k health or stamina. That's plenty. And if you're ever in a situation where you can trade stamina for damage, damage is better. Stamina is just for casting abilities. It does increase your damage to have it, but if you're trading max stam for weapon damage, the weapon damage is going to get you more damage than the max stam is in basically every case. So if you're thinking, wow, should I trade robust for infused because I'd lose stamina but gain damage? Yes, gain the damage. Infused is better than robust, unless you can't sustain because you're running out. But in that case, it's usually a player problem that you're overcasting buffs or roll dodging too often. Those are the two major ways that people burn through stamina. So there you go. Back to consumables. Again, I am using Artaeum Takeaway Broth. It gives me a nice healthy pool of stats, which I really appreciate. And I feel like the health recovery is especially useful in a meta where abilities don't always work. So having like 1k health recovery is pretty handy. And that kind of brings me to Vampirism. I tried Vampirism out again this patch, and I tried to give it like a really goodwill effort. And to be honest with you, I didn't expect to like it. On paper, it doesn't look that good to me. So I tried it, and I will say this about Vampirism. It is better than I thought it would be, but I still removed it when I was done testing. So why did I do that? First of all, the Undeath passive changed, and it's stronger than it used to be. It now scales from 100% health, and that's great. It's really nice, actually. It's finally a useful passive instead of being a throwaway that people use as an excuse to use Vamp. It's suddenly good, so great. It also means that you get damage every time you kind of come out of Cloak, which can be substantial. But that poses the same problem that I have with Torc, where in order to get your damage, you have to be cloaking every like 6 seconds if you want to keep that damage up. And to me, that's a no-go. I don't want to cloak every 6 seconds or even every 10 seconds or honestly even every 15. But if it was every 15, I'd use it out of principle because that's just way too good to pass up. But every 6 seconds to have to cloak or crouch to get your damage back, and 300 is a pretty significant amount. You're kind of building around that. I don't want to have to cloak to get my damage. And I don't want to have to dip out of fights in order to like re-pressure people. It's not for me. I like to be able to stay in the fight a little bit longer. And I was also finding that Vampirism turned every mediocre Magicka DK in the game into a god, and it was so hard to fight them. And while I never died like explicitly to fire as like, oh, you know, like that Magicka DK killed me because I'm a vamp, dude, you can feel it. And goodness gracious, you'll be lucky if you never die to that, because like Magicka DKs hit like a truck when you're a vamp, and they are rare. You're not going to run into a ton of them this patch because it's not a very good class, but when you fight them, it's rough. Not to mention Dawnbreaker is still like the most prevalent, most powerful, best stamina ultimate in the game, and most stamina players are running it on PCNA, and when you get hit by a Dawnbreaker, you can feel it, and Dawnbreakers that should not kill you have gotten me so close to dying that it's not even funny to think about. Actually, you know what? It is a little bit funny to think about, but yeah, you don't want to die from Dawnbreakers like that. And you can mitigate that by using Shuffle, but I don't like to use Shuffle because I don't feel like it's the best ability on my bar. And so I'll get into abilities, but it just, for me, the package that Vampirism offered wasn't great. And I did actually really enjoy the stealth passive where you could enter stealth quickly. It's cool because it allows you to hit cloak, stealth, and basically immediately be in stealth and running as soon as you come out of cloak. And that was pretty fantastic. I definitely used that way more than I thought I would, and it was fun. It was fun. I enjoyed playing as a vampire, but I took it off because I didn't feel like it was good enough. So hopefully that makes sense. Then let's see, what else is there to talk about? Let me talk about no CP before we hop into skills. If I was to change anything for no CP, the first thing that I would ask is, what's my experience level? I think a lot of people that ask me about no CP builds are asking because they're not sure what they should run because they're getting stomped in BGs and they don't feel like they do any damage and people just light them up. And that's kind of a different question. What should you run in BG versus what would I run in BGs? And so it's tough to say, but here's what I would say. If you are running out of stamina regularly in a BG, which I feel like is the main problem that no CP has, is your recovery. If you are running out of stamina regularly in a BG, pump your stamina up to like 2400, your stamina recovery. Pump it up to like 2400 and then slowly wean yourself down off of that. That way you're giving yourself too much stamina recovery, more than you should need, and that allows you to make mistakes and not just get insta-dead because you made mistakes. So I would say have more stamina recovery than you need, then work on casting buffs less. Like, don't overcast your buffs and don't roll dodge too many times. The two biggest mistakes that new players make are those two. It's overcasting buffs and roll dodging too much. Focus on not doing that anymore. And then once you're comfortable with it, once you're like, wow, I have stamina all the time, then whittle that down to around 2200. From that point, what I would say is, as a deviation from my build, Sheer Venom is extremely strong in no CP right now, and I think it's very hard not to use. So what I would say is I would still go 2 heavy, 5 medium, but now you're going to have to make your monster set heavy, and you can still use Balorg, or you can use Engine Guardian, which is great in no CP especially. Then you put Sheer Venom on the body, Briarheart front bar, and then again, you can use the Master Bow back bar if you don't have a Master Bow. You can use a Potentate bow or a Stamina recovery bow, a Magical recovery bow, even if that's your thing. Whatever you're struggling with, you can put a bow on your back bar that's going to help mitigate some flaw or shore up some patch. And that's a great way to run it. Sheer Venom on the body is excellent. It requires you to run one thing on each bar. It means that you're going to have to run an execute on your front bar, which usually is going to be Executioner if you're running a 2H. And on your back bar, you want to switch out Venom Arrow for its other morph, which is Poison Injection. And Poison Injection is an execute. So that way you have an execute on both bars. If you morph this to Reverse Slice, I've heard that you can actually put Sheer Venom on many people at once because Reverse Slice is an AoE, which means that you hit multiple people with an execute essentially, and Sheer Venom doesn't have a cooldown. In general, it has a cooldown per target, which means that you can actually hit multiple people with Sheer Venom. I haven't tested that myself. People have told me, so just disclaimer, I do encourage you to test it for yourself, but a lot of people have told me that, and I believe them. So that's cool. Sheer Venom seems strong, regardless of whether or not that little like reverse slice trick works. Sheer Venom is statistically just incredible, and it's crazy damage. It's an amazing proc set, and in no CP, it's going to shred people. So putting that on your Poison Inject, hitting someone with it, jumping in on them, and then hitting them with a couple abilities, and then using an Executioner, it's going to proc it again, and they're just going to melt. So that's what I would do in no CP as well. Let's see, anything else to talk about here? The other food that you can use if you don't want to use our tame takeaway broth is lava foot soup and salt rice. It is salt rice actually. Saltrice, lava foot soup and salt rice. And what that does is it gives you a ton of stamina recovery and max stam at the cost of health, max health and health recovery. And so then what you would do is go to your attributes and just pump your health up to a more comfortable level. and you'll be good to go. So that's the no CP build. That's also some viable alternatives, and I encourage you guys to go test it out, have fun. This is what I'm going to be running for a while, I would expect, and if there are any deviations in this moving forward, I'll be sure to let you know. But I've been testing out as many things as I could imagine, and this has been the one I've settled on as being the best all-around option. Again, the close runner-up is switching out Clever Alch for New Moon and having that on both bars. Even though it was nerfed, it's still incredibly strong. It's still good. Don't let the nerf fool you. A lot of people have been saying like, oh, what do you think of the New Moon nerf? It's not that big a deal. It's not a big deal. Like, it still has meant something. I don't think it's as worthwhile having as just your front bar anymore, but as a front bar back bar set that's buffing both bars, it's still hard to deny. It's a ton of damage, and the 2 through 4 piece is really solid too. That extra penetration that you get is hard to even calculate what it's worth. It's worth more than it appears to be. You really feel the increase in damage, and it's a great set. So don't be afraid to use that if you don't like Clever Alch. Okay, let's go through abilities. I almost forgot. Starting with the back bar, which is my bow bar, I have Shadowy Disguise. And of all the people that use Shadowy Disguise, I probably actually use it the least, but I kind of insist on having it on my bar. A lot of people like Dark Cloak, and it's also a good morph. Dark Cloak gives you a little heal over time and also gives you minor protection, and that's great, but it doesn't scale as well as Shadowy Disguise. The ability to turn invisible when like 8 people are beating on you and then suddenly stop taking damage from all of them is basically irreplaceable. I use it to detach from Zergs, especially in conjunction with Shadow Image, which we'll get to in a second. But it's such a powerful effect to turn invisible, and you're able to use it in this game, and it's such a strong aspect of the archetype, both thematically and also in a gameplay sense. So I really have a hard time turning it down ever, and that's no different this patch. I pretty much insist on using it, and I have a lot of fun with it. Leeching Strike's probably the most underrated ability on my bar. It gives you a ton of stamina recovery. It gives you a little hot as long as you're attacking, which ideally you'll be attacking all the time. And it gives you stamina recovery while you're doing things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to recover stam from. So like, say you have this ticking in the background and you're blocking or sprinting. Well, this will give you a little boost of stam when you cast again or when it expires, and that's really nice. So if you're sprinting away from a Zerg and you're just running out of stam, having Leeching Strikes on your bar can make a big difference. Not only that, but the passives are really excellent too. If you take a look at the siphoning passives, you can see that casting a siphoning ability is going to give you 2 ultimate that can happen every 4 seconds. It increases your healing done by 3%. It gives you 8% more max magicka. And of course, this is your bar with all of your magicka abilities, being Shadowy Disguise and Shadow Image, so that's really nice. Finally, Shadow Image. Shadow Image is such a great skill, and it's so fun, and it's also broken so often that when it's not broken, I basically insist on using it anyways. And a lot of people will probably prefer to run Shuffle here instead of Shadow Image, but I actually think that Shadow Image is much stronger. Not only is it better for getting out of situations where you've got a bunch of people chasing you, but it is also strong regardless of the type of enemy you're fighting. So say for example you get into a 1v1 with another Nightblade, that's actually a situation where having Shuffle on your bar is a disadvantage, because Shuffle doesn't actually do anything against a Nightblade, and if you're going to keep it up, then you're just going to use more stamina. Shadow Image is better because not only is it a really powerful effect, but it also procs your Shadow Barrier passive, which is super nice. So when I cast Shadow Image, you can see in the bottom left corner of my screen, I get that Shadow Barrier buff, which is increasing my resistances. And what's really cool about Shadow Image in particular, is that you get that buff again when you port back to it, but it doesn't actually cost any magicka. So when I teleport back to my shade, I get Shadow Barrier again, so I get that Major Resolve buff, but I haven't actually used any magicka. So it's a really great way to keep your Shadow Barrier buff, your major resistances up, without actually using a ton of magicka. So it's really powerful in that way. Not only that, but it also provides your kit with Minor Maim, which is really a big advantage in 1v1 situations over, say, Shuffle. Because Minor Maim is actually going to significantly reduce the amount of damage that enemies do. So it's a big deal. It's one of the strongest sources of mitigation in the game, and it's also a ton of fun. So why not use it? I am using Venom Arrow, and I use this for a lot of reasons. First of all, obviously, since I'm using the Master Bow in most of my builds, this procs the Master Bow. This is one of the 3 abilities that you can use from the bow tree, those being the base ability, and it's 2 morphs. So you get to choose between Poison Injection and Venom Arrow. And I choose Venom Arrow in open world because what I like to say is it does more and costs less. You get to interrupt people, set them off balance, and that actually means a lot more than you might think it does. That means that you can bash reses from range, which means you don't have to go back into a dangerous situation to bash people that you wouldn't want to bash. And it means that you can stun snipers who are charging up a snipe on you, and you get to essentially stun Sorcs that are trying to use their dark conversion. It's so fun. And it really catches a lot of newer players off guard when they're charging up a snipe and you hit them with this and they're stunned for a second. They're stunned mentally too, and that's fun to watch. I would probably use this in open world regardless of whether or not I was using the Master Bow, just because that secondary effect is so powerful. But if you're not in open world, there are a couple of other options, and I would consider this to be the flex spot. First of all, if you're in a BG, you don't really need to bash reses, and that's probably enough reason to use Poison Injection. Not to mention, if you're going to use a proc set like Sheer Venom, you want an Execute, and Poison Injection is an Execute. So if you're in a BG or playing no CP, you might want to morph this to Poison Injection. Or you might want to go a completely different approach and use something like Reaper's Mark here. This would be the slot for that. In fact, like basically any other buff type of ability, this is where I'd put it. If you want to say use Snipe, it would go here. If you want to use Magnum Shot, it'd go here. Bombard would go here. When I'm switching things around, this is my flex spot. I don't often change the other 4 abilities, but Venom Arrow is the one I kind of experiment with. But in open world, Venom Arrow is just, it does so much for you that it's really hard to give up. Resolving Vigor, this is the kind of go-to cornerstone stamina heal over time. Basically, I would consider this to be non-negotiable if you're a Nightblade, and you get it really easily nowadays. They just moved it up even further up the assault tree, so you can get it in like 20 minutes of PvPing by Zerg surfing. Another flex spot is my Backbar ultimate. Right now I'm using Temporal Guard, and this ends up being what I use almost all the time. It gives me minor protection at all times when I'm on my Backbar, which is really handy. And I very rarely actually use the ultimate, but when I do, it's a good ultimate when it works. And it seems like it's broken a lot, but when it works, it's fantastic. You just teleport back in time and space, usually. And so that'll move you back to where you were 4 seconds ago. So if you get bursted and you're about to die, you can hit this and you'll go back in time, get your health back, and you'll be good to go. Other options here, you could run Werewolf. Just slotting Werewolf, even if you don't transform, gives you another 15% stamina recovery. That can be really helpful for new players, especially since Werewolf is a lot easier to get than Psijic. Psijic is kind of a grind, for sure. And I also really like putting Ballista here every now and then. Ballista is a huge tooltip, and since I have New Moon on both bars and can proc Briar and then Backbar, like that means that Ballista can actually get pretty insanely high in damage, and it's a lot of fun. Not to mention that it just sits there and does its thing, so you can fire this off and then go in yourself and be meleeing them as the ballista is hitting them. And 5 seconds is a long time for an ultimate to be working. Not to mention you're already using Balorg, so the damage on this gets pretty insane, and it's a lot of fun. For front bar, I've got Camo Hunter as my first slot. You get this in the Fighters Guild, and it's basically a passive. It just gives you major savagery at all times, and when you hit someone in the flank, you gain minor berserk for 5 seconds. So, I mean, you have to deal crit damage from the flank, but I've got like a 57% chance to crit, so it's up pretty frequently, and you don't have to hit them with your melee ability. Like, if you've got a dot ticking on them, like Venom Arrow, for example, and you're oriented towards their flank, it'll still proc, so you can basically have that. I mean, this is up all the time, so this is a great one to have. Every now and then, I'll use it to pull people out of stealth, but a 6-meter radius is really small. You have to be right on top of them. So if you're using the Ring the Wild Hunt, I found this to be more helpful because you can kind of guarantee that you're right on top of them and they can't run away in stealth. And then you can pull them out and they're out for 3 seconds? Not a long time, but it's enough to get an in-cap off or something like that. Relentless Focus is your big boy damage ability. This is what really kills people. This is the combo. So, I mean, it's basically mandatory to have this too because it's so much damage, and what you're going to be doing most of the time in an ideal world is getting an in-cap into Relentless, and if they're not dead from there, you can execute them. Everything else is basically to support that combo, and there are variations of it, but that's what you're aiming to do, is get an in-cap and then shoot a Relentless at them. Next is Rally. Rally is a super useful ability, and it's the main reason that people run 2H over dual wield. There are a lot of reasons to run 2H over dual wield, but this is a big one. Rally is a really big heal, and you kind of have to play around it because you're going to cast it. It's going to tick down, and then you're going to cast it again, and depending on how much time has elapsed from your first cast is going to dictate how much bigger your heal is. So that's really nice, and it also gives you Major Brutality. So if you're not using 2H, you have to figure out a new way to get Major Brutality, which is a really big deal. And then this also gives you Minor Endurance now, which means that you get 10% more stamina recovery while it's active. So it's a heal, and it gives you damage, and it gives you recovery. So it's like one of the most overtuned, or you know what, I won't say that, but I will say it's one of the most well-rounded abilities. It gives you the most, it's super efficient, it gives you a huge amount of bang for buck. So use this. This is why people run 2H. Surprise Attack is your spammable. What's really great about this is that it is a shadow ability. So what that means is that while you're attacking, you're getting that shadow barrier buff. So anytime you're on offense, as long as you're, buttering this in there, you're going to have your defense up as well. So that's kind of the style of Nightblade. You attack to defend. Put on a lot of pressure, and Surprise Attack will help you do it. This is your spammable. It is the bread and butter move. You're going to be using it a lot, and it's kind of what you use in between your in-cap Relentless combo to put on pressure. Executioner, a fantastic execute, especially with how high damage is in the patch right now. You can really regularly execute people from 30, 35, even 40% health if you get a crit and they're not very good. Or they haven't built properly, rather. It's probably the better way to say it. You can get huge executes. Like I've hit 14k executes pretty regularly, and that's not at 1-2% health. But the lower they get, the more damage this does, and because it scales from such a high number of health, and because damage is so high, you can get some insane executes. Now, when people compare it to Killer's Blade, which is the first execute in the assassination tree, Killer's Blade has better passives. It increases your crit chance while it's on your bar, but it has a lower health threshold, so they have to be at 25% health or below, and it does a lot more for you. But because damage is so high, you can execute people from 35% health, so it kind of makes it a tough argument to go for Killer's Blade. But if you have lower damage, or you're in a BG and you need sustain or better passives, I would say consider using Killer's Blade. It is a really strong ability and not one to be forgotten about. But in CP, where you're hitting people with ridiculous damage, I think Executioner is the better way to go. They're both really fun to use, actually. They both cancel really well. They're both really satisfying abilities. I enjoy them both, and I swap them back and forth every once in a while. But I'm currently of the opinion that Executioner is the stronger overall ability. Your front bar ultimate, you have two options, and I think this one is better. You can choose between Incapacitating Strike, or you can choose the Dark Brotherhood, oh my gosh, the Fighters Guild Dawnbreaker of Smiting. To me, I think it's really hard to argue with Incap. Incap gives you a lot, but the biggest thing it gives you is the 20% more damage for 6 seconds. So you hit someone with this, it's a pretty high tooltip. You can stun people with it if you cast it over 120 ultimate. And then it causes the person that you hit to take 20% more damage from you for 6 seconds, which means when you then follow up with the Relentless, you can get some really, really, really high damage Relentless tips. So those can be a lot of fun. If you crit the Incap and crit the Relentless, you'll pretty much kill them in just a 2-shot combo. And if there's anything left, you can usually execute. So that's why I choose Incap. Not to mention, I don't want to have to use Dawnbreaker. Dawnbreaker is a fantastic ability, but it's so good that basically all Stam classes use it. So being a Stamblade, you want to have a little bit of class identity and use an ultimate that only you have access to. So hopefully Incap stays good, even if it's just for that reason alone, because if Incap doesn't stay good, basically every Stam class is going to be using Dawnbreaker, and that's just not as fun, in my opinion. But, whatever. I think, regardless of my opinion on wanting Incap to be good, I think it actually is just mathematically the better option if you're 1v1ing. Now, if you're with a group of people, like 2 or 3 other people, there's a really strong argument for slotting Dawnbreaker and having all 3 or 4 of your group members slot Dawnbreaker, and then you can drop like 3 or 4 Dawnbreakers on a group all at once. So layering Dawnbreakers on top of each other is a great way to burst down like huge groups of enemies. You can easily kill 6 to 10 people if you've got 4 guys laying down Dawnbreakers at once and then going into like executes right away. So a few good options there, a few fun options. Now, as far as abilities go, if you are playing in a group, you kind of use different abilities. Like for 1vxing and 2vxing, playing in a small group, these are the exact bars that I use, and I would say I use these bars the majority of the time. But if you're in a group, like we talked about, you might want to put Dawnbreaker on here. You are probably going to want to put Shuffle on here, because if you're sticking with a group, you're not going to teleport away from your group as a way to stay alive. That's going to put you at risk because you're now leaving your group and the protection that they offer you passively just by there being more targets to hit. And you're putting them at risk because suddenly you've just left the fight and now it's 3v10 instead of 4v10 or whatever it would have been, right? So Shuffle gives you ability to stay with the group by having a snare break, and it also gives you major evasion, which decreases damage from AoEs. So if people try to drop a bunch of Dawnbreakers on you and your group, you're good because you've got Shuffle to help reduce that damage. So that's good. Dawnbreaker, again, if you're in a group, you might want to do something like putting on Bombard. And Bombard is going to snare people. So say you're running in a group, right, and you've got 10 guys chasing you. Well, you can bombard them to freeze them in place for a second, and then your entire group can turn around and drop Dawnbreakers. So I think abilities are where the build can vary the most depending on what you're actually doing. But when I'm just, 1vxing, these are the bars that I use. So if you have any questions about that or anything else, you can let me know, and I'm happy to answer those in the comments when I can. It's gotten to the point where I can't read all of them, but I do my best. Last thing I want to talk about are consumables, and the main potion I use is Essence of Health. It's just a tripod. Not only does it give you a big boost to each of your stats, but it also gives you the major form of recovery to each one. So you gain like 20% more health recovery, stam, and magicka recovery. So that's really useful, especially since we already have a lot of health recovery. Getting another 20% on top of that is pretty handy. It's also good to keep detect pots on hand. These ones are kind of fun because they give you Major Vitality. There are also Immove detect pots and all sorts of fun detect pots that can give you a little edge up. So not only do you detect somebody, but you can be a little tankier or gain Major Savagery that way if you don't already have it on your bar from Camo Hunter. A couple good options. I do think detect pots need a buff. They should do more for you in addition to detecting, because 15.7 seconds for effects is just not a long time. So hopefully we'll see a buff to those someday. I like to keep invis pots on me every once in a while, just in case you run out of magicka or you're in a pinch and everyone's dead around you. You can use a detect pot, disappear for almost 16 seconds, and have Major Expedition the whole time, which means that you're going to be really fast while invisible, and you don't really have to roll dodge again to get away. So those are a lot of fun. And then, of course, immovability pots. A lot of people have been asking me, hey, I'm having trouble finishing the combo because every time I'm about to, I get CC'd. Well, this is the solution. If you're fighting a group that has a lot of CCs and they're freezing you every time you do an in-cap so that you can't follow up, then pop one of these, and then you have 10 seconds to do your full combo. So it gives you health and stam, and you're trading out the magicka, the boost of magicka, and the extra recovery in order to become immune to CCs for almost 11 seconds. Use that to your advantage. I like to keep a bunch of these on me. I use them a lot less frequently. I'd say I use 10 tripods for every one immove pot, or maybe it's even more extreme. It might be 20 tripods for every one immove pot. But when you need them, it's really nice to have a stack of them, that's for sure. Finally, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's been supporting me and watching me on Twitch, especially Twitch subs. I really appreciate you guys. Those people who are there right at the beginning of the stream or come when they're at work, just go out of their way to hang out and have a good time and learn some Nightblade. I really appreciate it. You've helped me get so far, and it's been such a fun time. So thank you guys extra. I just wanted to let you know that I'm really thankful for what you guys have done for me. So I hope this video helps. Let me know if you have any questions, and hopefully I'll see you in Cyrodiil.